Well, I don't really remember starting to sew. I remember sewing by hand, really, really tiny. And then when I was 6 years old, I got my first sewing machine, which was a toy, a little hand crank, but it really sewed. So from that point on, I sewed pretty much everything. You know, I don't know what it was that made me want to sew, except that my father was a mechanic, he had a garage, and my mom used to buy big boxes of old clothing from the rag man, and she used to like tear them apart to make shop rags for my dad. And so I was fascinated with like the buttons and just the little embellishments on clothing. So I used to save all those because those were of no use to my father in the shop. And so I used to cut things off. And then when I learned how to start sewing a little bit, when I first started sewing, I lived out in the country. I lived in an all-boy neighborhood out in farm country, and there were no girls to play with. So I used to dress my pets. I had a cat and a dog, and I made clothing for them. I made outfits for them. So I started collecting like laces and just, really just repurposing things from these old clothing, and I would just, I learned back then that it took quite a bit of tailoring to make a dress for a dog or a cat. And so that was, my pets actually had their own little closet. So, yeah. Well, as time went on, I got an electric sewing machine when I was in high school. I got a Singer when I was in college, had industrial machines when I started my business in 1981. And I knew a little bit about Bernina, but I had never really sewn on one. And when I was moving from the DC area back home, I knew that my industrial machines would be in storage for probably a year. So I went into the store where I was teaching part-time called G Street, and I bought a Bernina, and I said, I want the heaviest machine you have to sew heavy-duty fabrics. So they sold me the 1031, and that was kind of like, as they say, history was written. That's the rest of the story. I got hooked on it. It was a great machine, and I just grew from there. Well, I think as an interior designer who has had a workroom for years, it's probably the best machine for sewing heavy fabric. I love the embroidery, but it's not really what I'm known for. I have sewn, I push the limit with what I do. I sew through welt cord and zippers and heavy fabric, and sometimes double, triple trim. And so it's good to have that machine that has that great piercing power that can go through all of that. So for me, it's just been a workhorse, but it's a workhorse that's been my passion. I would say quality, consistency, versatility. I love that there are so many accessory feet, like 80 different feet. I mean, that's one of the things. I teach all over the country. I teach on every brand. And I know when I go into certain stores, there are techniques I can't show because they don't have the feet. And I love the fact that Bernina listens and creates the feet that we need for all kinds of sewing. I love the fact that they have the double welting foot, which is a technique that I use, but I also use that foot to put in zippers. And I just rock people's worlds when I show them how easy it is to put in a zipper. And shoot, with a Bernina, it's easy. I think it's the sewing family. I really do. Even more than the machine, it's the people that embrace the family. People here at the company. I love Jeannie. She's just, whenever I have a question, I call her. She's right there. Everyone is always so wonderful, so receptive. If you have a concern about something, they're really good about answering your questions. Sometimes the answer is no, but they do answer your questions, and it's good. They really do. I think they really do care about us. They want us to be successful, and they do everything they can to make it work for us. Well, decorating is different than other areas of sewing. People tend to think that there's not a whole lot to it, but there really is. I think a lot of my inspiration comes from the clothing industry. People don't realize it, but in decorating there are trends, just as there are in clothing, and the clothing trends tend to lead the market, and the decorating trends tend to follow. So I will go through, I'll give you a good example. I was at breakfast the other day in my hotel, and there was a young woman with this absolutely amazing skirt that was done with like a circular ruffle, but it was like sewn in gauze. like in between gores, and it just made her, when she walked, she looked like a flower in the wind. It was beautiful. And I said, that's a pillow. That's a pillow. I can do that. I can cut diagonal cuts. I can add that circular insert. I'll use my serger and do a nice rolled edge, you know, and there is a pillow. That's my inspiration. So I look at the clothing industry because the decorating industry follows it. So it's so easy to decide what the trends are going to be in decorating. Because if you just go into the store, like, look, I wear this jacket. I think that pink is going to be a hot color in decorating, because when you go through the clothing stores, you see pinks and teals and corals and really pretty bright colors. And I think those bright colors are really coming back into decorating, and you're going to see a lot more of the bright, fun colors in decorating. That's where I get my inspiration. Just walking around, looking through magazines, walking through the department stores, looking at what people are wearing.